Thank you for joining us tonight for our Path to Citizenship presentation. We are very excited to have Alana Boyskin and her colleague Margarita Sandler from Highest Immigration and Citizenship with us. Alana is the Highest Community Engagement Specialist. She's responsible for educational programs and presentations and is originally from South Africa. Margarita Sandler is a U.S. Department of Justice accredited representative working with Highest since 1996. She is bilingual in Russian and English and specializes in immigration legal services. She is originally from Russia. If you think of any questions, please enter them into the chat and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. If you need help at any point, let us know in the chat and either Alana or I will assist you. If at any point you get cut off and are disconnected, just go to the link and enter the program or the presentation and I will admit you back in. Now, please join me in welcoming Alana and Margarita.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Alana Boyskin, and thank you so much for joining this evening. A big thank you to the Vernon Area Public Library for inviting Highest to present tonight, and to Corey for being a great partner and facilitating this, helping us facilitate this presentation. We will focus on the path to citizenship, the steps you take from permanent resident or green card holder to U.S. citizen. I will be presenting the slides, and my co-presenter, Margarita Sandler, who is the Legal Services Case Manager with Highest, will answer questions at the end. Please submit your questions in the chat box as soon as you have them. But keep in mind, we can only answer questions in a general way. If you want more specific legal advice for yourself or your family, please call the Highest intake line and one of our caseworkers will help you, or feel free to contact Margarita or me directly. At the end, I'm going to ask you to please complete a satisfaction survey. It's probably takes 30 seconds to do it. A link to the survey is posted in the chat box now, I believe, and it'll be there reposted at the end. You click on the link, answer a few questions, and submit it online. It is anonymous. It's super helpful to get your feedback so we can bring you future presentations that you are interested in. I'll now begin with just a little background on Highest. So for many years, Highest has been helping people of all backgrounds come to America. Highest in the Chicagoland area has offices in Skokie, Lake Zurich, and Palatine. Highest is a Department of Justice recognized agency, and our caseworkers are accredited to offer immigration legal services, and they speak Spanish, Russian, and English. During this presentation, as I mentioned, we can help you out in a general way, but for legal advice, you would need to contact our intake line, which is on the slide, 312-357-4666. Highest provides a full range of low-cost legal services. We support applications for citizenship, and in just a minute, we're going to get into detail on what is involved when you apply for citizenship. And we also help people apply for green cards, fee waivers, medical disability waivers, DACA, and for a family member to immigrate to the US. We offer citizenship classes, practice interviews, and informational programs such as this one tonight to help you prepare for the citizenship interview and test. So what is naturalization? It is the process for lawful permanent residents, or LPRs, to become US citizens. It's important to be aware that you can file the N-400 yourself, but if you need legal help, we recommend applying with the help of a DOJ recognized agency or immigration attorney. Be careful not to become a victim of immigration scams. If you need legal advice on immigration matters, make sure the person helping you is authorized to give legal advice. Only an attorney or an accredited representative working for a Department of Justice recognized organization can give you that legal advice. The wrong help can hurt you. Go to USCIS website, uscis.gov/avoid scams to learn more. Margarita, my co-presenter, is accredited by the DOJ and doing immigration legal services for more than 20 years. The rates at many nonprofits agencies can be very low. Highest, for example, charges $65 for an application for naturalization. Separate from the highest fee, there is, of course, a USCIS fee to submit the N400, and we'll talk about USCIS fees later on. Are you already a US citizen? If you are, you do not need to waste time applying for naturalization. And this may sound a bit silly, but some people don't realize they are. Generally, people are US citizens if they are born in the US or if they are born abroad to US citizens. Or you also may automatically become a US citizen if you are under the age of 18 when your parent naturalizes. In that case, you file Form N600 or N600K to request evidence of citizenship if you are claiming US citizenship through parents, because you're already a citizen, so you're not applying for citizenship. You just want evidence to show you're a citizen. Please seek legal advice if you are unsure. Let's talk about the benefits of citizenship. There are many benefits to becoming a US citizen. You have the right to vote. You can file immigration petitions to reunite with family members. Some government jobs are only available to US citizens. Also, naturalized citizens on average tend to earn more than non-citizens. US citizens mostly cannot be deported. Criminal activity, even if no jail time is involved, puts you at risk for deportation if you are a permanent resident. Most green cards expire every 10 years, so you don't have the hassle of renewing anything if you are a citizen. Permanent residence travel is restricted. US citizens have the freedom to travel and go in and out of the country without those restrictions, and you can stay abroad as long as you want. Also, keep in mind, a US citizen has access to more public benefits. Public benefits are government programs that help you pay for food, housing, healthcare, and other living expenses. Permanent residents who've lived in the US for 5 years or more and pay their taxes do have access to public benefits, but there are restrictions to it. A sponsor can restrict an immigrant's ability to get public benefits. When you entered the US, you may have had someone sponsor you by signing an affidavit of support. If you have a sponsor, their income and resources may count against you when you apply for public benefits, and the sponsor may be held responsible for paying back the benefit to the agency. So counting the sponsor's income and resources as yours can make it much harder to meet the financial test required to be eligible for the public benefit. Requiring reimbursement from a sponsor is another significant obstacle to accessing benefits. It is also much harder for an LPR to qualify for SSI, which is Supplemental Security Income, a federal program to help seniors, blind people, and disabled people who have little income. Let's talk about eligibility to apply for citizenship. Are you eligible to naturalize? Before you apply, you must meet all of these requirements. You must be 18 or older, which means not 17 3/4. You must be a lawful permanent resident, which means have a green card. You must show that you have had continuous permanent residence or a permanent home as an LPR in the US for at least 5 years, and 3 years if you are married to a US citizen before you apply. A note about marriage. If you are applying for naturalization based on marriage to a US citizen at the time of filing, the applicant must have 3 years here in the US as a permanent resident. Applicant must be married to the same US citizen for 3 years, and the applicant's US citizen spouse must be a citizen for 3 years, and this is called the 333 requirement. So how do you show you have continuously resided here? Absences of less than 6 months are okay. If you are away from 6 months to 1 year, it might be okay, but you have to prove you did not disrupt continuity. For example, if you can show the immigration officer that you still have employment, your immediate family is still living in the US, and your home is in the US, then you may be fine. Continuous residence is definitely broken by absences of 1 year or more, and you have to start from the beginning again to accumulate the 5 years or 3 years continuous residence before you apply. You will need to bring all your valid and expired passports and travel documents to the naturalization interview to prove your continuous residence. There's also a physical presence requirement, which is different than continuous residence. You must be physically present in the US for at least half of the 5-year or 3-year period, which is 30 months for the 5-year or 18 months for the 3 years before you apply. You must demonstrate actual physical presence through documents such as school records, tax returns, letters of employment, and such. And just having and showing your green card is not enough. And eligibility continued. You must live in the USCIS district where you apply for at least 3 months before you apply. During the interview, a USCIS officer will test your ability to read, write, and speak English, unless you have an English exemption, and your knowledge of civics and US history. Most applicants fail the naturalization test because they cannot answer the interview questions in English. So I should just probably say that sentence differently. Most applicants pass the test, but the few that fail, mostly they fail because they cannot answer the questions in English. You should be fully prepared for the English portion by the time you apply. You must show good moral character, and we'll talk later on that and what that means. And if the USCIS approves your application, you must be willing to take the oath of allegiance to become a US citizen. This means you are willing to support and defend the United States and its Constitution. You declare your loyalty to the United States and the Constitution. Just an important note, at the interview, the officer will ask you to sign that you are willing to take the oath of allegiance. This does not mean that you have taken the oath. It only means you are willing to take it. So you only become a citizen after taking the oath of allegiance at the oath ceremony. Let's talk about the English exception. One of the requirements for naturalization is to demonstrate that you are able to read, write, and speak simple English, and you have a basic knowledge of US history and government, which we call civics. If you are eligible for one of the exceptions listed on the slide, you do not take the English reading, writing, and speaking test, but you must still take the civics test and answer questions about your application in your language of choice. And I'll just run through the exceptions. If at the time of filing the N-400, you are 50 years old or older and have lived in the US as a permanent resident for 20 years, you do not have to take the English test. Or you are 55 years old or older and have lived here for 15 years as a permanent resident, you don't have to take the English test. Or if you are 65 years old or older and have lived in the US for 20 years as a permanent resident, you don't have to take the English test, and you get to take an easier civics test. If you have this exception and you take the test in your language of choice, you must have an interpreter fluent in both English and your language of choice. Let's talk about the medical disability exception. You also do not have to take English or civics tests if you can show you have a medical condition that has lasted or is going to last for 12 months, and the condition makes you unable to do the English or civics tests. Form N-648, medical certification for disability exceptions, should be filed with the N-400 at the same time. Only medical doctors, doctors of osteopathy, or clinical psychologists licensed to practice in the US are authorized to certify Form N-648. Before certifying, they must have conducted an in-person exam. The medical professional must answer all questions on Form N-648 fully and accurately. They must clearly establish how disability makes you unable to take the English and civics tests. Illiteracy, which means inability to read or write English, does not qualify for an exception. Be aware that it is hard to get a medical exception form approved, especially if the medical professional is new to this form or is unclear on what USCIS is looking for. So who should not apply for a medical exception? If you have a disability, but you can still take the test in English with a reasonable accommodation or modification you make with USCIS, such as the ones that I listed, you don't need to apply for a medical exception. You must apply for accommodation instead. Let me just read what's the accommodations. If you can get a sign language interpreter, or you can get extra time for testing or testing in a special location, Those are accommodations. And you would show that on part 3 of Form N400. The decision on your Form N648 will be made at the time of your naturalization interview. If the officer accepts your Form N648, they will conduct the eligibility interview in your language of choice with the use of an interpreter and will not test you on English or civics. If your N648 is denied, the immigration officer will proceed with your interview as if you had not submitted an N648, and you will be tested on English, civics, and so forth. You can choose not to continue. However, your refusal will count as a failed attempt to pass the English and civics test. So what does the officer look at in deciding on your N648? Is your N648 form current and submitted along with your N400? Is the form complete? Is the connection clear between the medical diagnosis and inability to learn English or civics? Are there any signs of fraud? Now, another really important eligibility question: do you have good moral character? You must show good moral character in the 5 years before your application and up to the time of taking the oath of allegiance. The officer may even review your conduct prior to the 5 years. Here are a few examples of conduct that will prevent you from being able to show good moral character. 1 or more crimes of moral turpitude. There is no specific definition except that it's a crime that just shocks you and is very bad, such as domestic violence, for example. Any drug offenses except for possession of 30 grams of marijuana or less will be a problem. Even if marijuana is legal in your state, under federal law, it is illegal, and any admission that you used or sold marijuana can cause your application to be denied. Imprisonment for 6 months or more, prostitution, illegal gambling, smuggling aliens into the US, habitual drunkenness, not paying child support, 2 or more convictions for driving under the influence, and an applicant convicted of certain very serious crimes such as murder or aggravated felony can never become a US citizen. Let's talk about the application itself. When you meet all the requirements to become a US citizen, you complete Form N400 to apply for naturalization. You can find the form on uscis.gov/N400 along with instructions for completing the form. Those instructions are really helpful, by the way. Or if you need help, go to, just a reminder, a DOJ recognized agency or immigration attorney. And make sure you have the current edition of the form dated 9/17/19 at the bottom of the page. Be prepared to answer detailed questions about eligibility, yourself and names that you've used, accommodations for disabilities, your contact information, your residence for the past 5 years, your parents, biographic information, employment in schools for 5 years, all travel outside the US for the past 5 years, your marital history, children, moral character, which is part 12, anyone who helped you with your application and their contact information. And my favorite, if you're willing to renounce a foreign title, such as if you're a prince or princess, are you willing to give that up and take the oath of allegiance? Now we focus on part 12, the moral character section. Please be completely honest about your past, even if embarrassing. Questions will ask you about the US, have you ever made claims to being a US citizen? Have you ever had foreign titles? Your legal competence, do you owe taxes? Organizations you belong to, political parties you belong to, war crimes committed, military units you belong to, any crimes, general crimes, lying for immigration benefits, removals from the US, discharges from the armed forces, and selective service. Almost all questions asked, has this ever applied to you? So it applies to your whole life, and it's not just about the last few years. A minor criminal offense, this is important to remember now, a minor criminal impact your case, but lying about it will. USCIS can deny your application and impose penalties. So applying for naturalization, part 12 still, Very important questions. Some say the most important part of the whole application. 45 to 50 ask you if you are willing to support the US Constitution, take the oath of allegiance, bear arms, perform non-combatant services, and perform work of national importance for the US. These questions must be answered yes, unless you have an oath modification or oath waiver. An applicant may request a modified oath that does not contain one or both of the following sentences. To bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by the law. That means a promise to carry guns and fight for the US if there is war, or to perform non-combatant services in the US Armed Forces when required by the law. That means a promise to help in some way other than fighting, work in a hospital, kitchen, or office. So you may request that those sentences are taken out of the oath. In order to qualify for a modified oath, the applicant must demonstrate clearly through evidence that the oath goes against their religious training or belief. USCIS may waive the oath of allegiance, which means you don't have to say it at all, for an applicant who is unable to understand its meaning because of a physical or developmental disability. Generally, USCIS requires a written evaluation from a medical professional that states a person is unable to take the oath due to a medical condition. So let's talk about challenging words in the N400. The interviewer may ask you the meaning of a question in your N400 or even the meaning of a word. And there are two reasons. First, USCIS wants to make sure you understood the question well enough to answer it correctly. The second reason is to test your English skills. It is much harder to explain something than to say yes or no. So if you can explain what something means in English, it shows that your English skills are pretty good. Be prepared to explain the meaning of some of the words in the N400 so the officer knows you understand it. Especially important in part 12, which has many challenging terms. For example, just take one question. Number 10 asks, have you ever been a member of or in any way associated with the Communist Party, the Totalitarian Party, or a terrorist organization? An officer may ask you, well, just what does totalitarian mean? You could say using control over the freedom of others. Or what does terrorist mean? And that could be using violence and threats to intimidate others. Or what is communist? And you could say a society where everyone is equal. So the required evidence. Along with completing the questions, you need to submit evidence with your N400 and bring it to the interview as well. So you not only submit your application with the evidence, you bring your evidence to the interview. It's a good idea to keep a folder organized with all of your documents you'll need, and then bring that to the interview. All of this information is listed in detail at uscis.gov/N400, and if you click on the instructions. I've listed just a few common examples here, but this is not complete. So you would need a photocopy of the permanent resident card front and back to go with your N400, and you bring the actual card to the interview. You need a second form of ID at the interview with a photo, such as a driver's license. A photocopy of a marriage certificate would go with your N400 and the original to the interview. Passports valid and expired and travel documents bring to the interview. You would bring to the interview evidence, if you have children, evidence of the children, such as birth and adoption certificates. And if they are living apart from you, evidence that you support them. You need evidence of tax returns and overdue taxes. So would bring to the interview photocopies of income tax returns filed with the IRS for the past 5 years or 3 years if you're applying through marriage. And for the selective service, if you are a man between the ages of 18 and 26, living as an LPR in the US, you must register for the selective service and provide proof of your registration to USCIS. If you are between the ages of 26 and 31, you must provide proof that you registered with the selective service when you were required to do so. If you have ever been arrested, detained anywhere in the world for any reason, with or without charges, you must bring all reports connected with the case and that show the disposition of your case. Documents must be originals or certified copies. So, documents and fees include required evidence, such as photocopy of both sides of the green card, Supporting documents such as your Form N648 medical certification. This is everything that goes into your packet that you're submitting. The filing fee of $640 for the N400 application, and the biometrics fee, $85 if you're under 75 years old, for a total of $725. And if you're eligible for a full fee waiver or fee reduction, you would include that as well. And you need to provide documentation to prove you are eligible. So your household income must be greater than, so to be eligible for a fee reduction, household income must be greater than 150% and not more than 200% of federal poverty guidelines. You would complete Form I-942, which is a request for a reduced fee. If approved, you will pay $320 plus $85 biometrics fee for a total of $405. Now, are you potentially eligible for a fee waiver? You would complete Form I-912, request for fee waiver. You will qualify for a fee waiver, which means you pay no fee at all if you, your spouse, or the head of household living with you receives a means-tested benefit, or your household income is below 150% of the federal poverty guidelines based on your household size, or you have financial hardship that could be due to medical expenses, unemployment, eviction, homelessness, or other reasons. Appropriate documents must be provided to support these claims. So these are the income guidelines for fee reduction or waiver for 2021. I didn't see the 2022 guidelines out yet. Sometimes they may change slightly, but wouldn't be much difference. The household size, which is the column on the left, and the corresponding income guideline to be eligible for fee reduction or waiver are on the slide. These guidelines are effective as of January last year, and they're updated annually. The fee reduction example, to qualify for the fee reduction for N400, you need to show your annual household income is greater than 150%, but not more than 200% of the federal poverty guidelines at the time you file. Let's use household size 5 as an example. If there are 5 people in your household, you need to show your income is greater than $46,560, but no more than $62,080. To qualify for the fee waiver for N400, you need to show your annual income is below 150% of guidelines at time you file. If, for example, you have 5 people in your household, you would need to show your income is below $46,560. Are you eligible for a highest scholarship? Partial scholarships are available for highest clients whose households earn between 150% and 200% of federal poverty guidelines on a first-come, first-served basis. So now you go to submit the Form N400. USCIS is moving away from paper. You can complete and submit the N400 online, or you can do it via regular mail. If you do it online, you must create a free USCIS online account at myaccount.uscis.gov and file it online. You would include your application, supporting documents, and fees, and keep copies of everything. Any N400 not accompanied by correct fees or not fully complete or unsigned will be rejected. I have heard that a decent amount are unsigned, and so then the application is returned because people just forget to do that. And once you submit, you will get a receipt notice in the mail from USCIS. You can check the status of your application by going to uscis.gov. Keep your receipt notice and all other notices from USCIS in case you need proof of receipt later on. So let's talk about next steps. The biometrics appointment. So USCIS has received your application. So now they're going to notify you about your biometrics appointment. They require fingerprints, photos for the FBI background check before scheduling the interview. So you'll receive your appointment notice for the biometrics with the date, time, and location. and you will go and have the biometrics taken. And let's just unpack a little what that means. So once you've applied, USCIS conducts a full investigation into your background to see if there's any sort of criminal record. This includes getting your fingerprints and doing a name check and other background checks. Wait for your biometrics appointment notice and go to the appointment with the notice. If you need to reschedule, follow instructions on your biometrics appointment notice. Your case may be closed if you don't appear for the fingerprinting appointment without good reason and without notifying USCIS. As a result of the background check, the immigration officer at your interview will have a listing of any prior criminal record, arrests, DUIs, and such. So please, no point in hiding anything. Scheduling the interview. So after the biometrics appointment, you can expect to now receive your next appointment notice, which will be for an in-person naturalization interview. And the time from the application to the interview is now unpredictable, due to the pandemic, and I think it's always a little bit unpredictable. Generally speaking, we tell applicants it could take a year, but it could be less than that or longer. Some applicants think that they are not allowed to travel out of the country once they have submitted their N400 application. You absolutely can travel, as long as you meet the continuous residence and physical presence requirements discussed earlier and are not at risk of violating those requirements by staying out of the country, and you are confident that you will get back to the US in time for your interview. Keep in mind that you need a negative COVID test before flying back to the US from foreign countries. And if you test positive, you will have to wait until you recover outside the US. The interview notice arrives about a month before your scheduled interview. So if you're out of the country when the notice is mailed to you, you would need to also have someone checking your mail for the notice. So let's talk about the interview. You read your appointment notice carefully. You report to USCIS at the date and time on your notice and bring it with you. If you cannot make it, follow the instructions on your notice to reschedule and follow any and all social distancing guidelines that are in there. You attend the interview on the day it is scheduled. To cancel and reschedule, you must show good cause, such as an illness. There's no penalty for rescheduling your appointment if you are sick, especially if due to COVID, but simply being unprepared is not a good reason. If you just skip the interview, USCIS may close your case and you will need to start all over again and reapply. You must follow USCIS visitor policy to protect from coronavirus, and there will be instructions to that effect on your appointment notice. Read all notices carefully. Expect, if you are fully vaccinated, to go for your interview. Expect to be asked to wear a mask, and you can be accompanied in person by an attorney, an interpreter if you're eligible to bring one, a parent or legal guardian or a trusted adult if the applicant being interviewed is a minor, and an individual providing you disability assistance. You'll meet with the USCIS officer who will be judging your English from the moment you're called in from the waiting room, and your ability to answer small talk questions such as how did you get here, do you like the weather today, etc. So those questions may seem innocent, but if you're unable to answer them, they can already tell that there's an issue with the English. So they are judging you right away on that. An immigration officer will place you under oath, review your N400 to see if you are eligible, assess your ability to speak and understand English, give the reading and writing tests, and give you the civics test. USCIS is using tablets such as iPads with a stylus to administer the reading and writing tests and for signatures. They will use paper on a case-by-case basis. For the reading test, a sentence will appear on a tablet and the immigration officer will ask you to read it. You need 1 out of 3 to pass, so you get 3 chances. If you get the first sentence right, you move on to the writing test. They won't ask you 3, they'll only ask you 1, and if you get that right, that's enough. But you have 3 chances. The writing test, several lines will appear on a tablet and it will look like a piece of paper. The officer will read a question out loud and the applicant will write the sentence on the tablet using a stylus. And it's the same thing, that you need 1 out of 3 to pass. The moment you get your one sentence right, you move to the next test. If you get 3 wrong, then you will fail that test. The civics test. Applicants will be asked in English up to 10 questions from the list of 100 civics questions available on their website. You must answer correctly 6 of the 10 questions to pass. However, you need to study all 100 questions in advance, as you don't know which 10 questions you will get. All questions are asked orally. Take the English test and you get to take an easier civ test. And in that case, you will only need to study the 20 civics questions marked with an asterisk instead of all 100 questions, and you must still answer 6 out of 10 correctly to pass. To learn more and find resources and study materials, go to the USCIS Citizenship Resource Center, uscis.gov/citizenship. If you pass the reading, writing, and civics, that does not mean USCIS will approve your Form N400. You still have to prepare for the speaking portion of the naturalization test and meet all the other naturalization requirements. The speaking test occurs during the review of your N400 application. And this is probably the most challenging part for people who struggle with English. The officer will review the written responses you provided on your N400 and will ask questions to confirm your responses. The officer is looking for consistency between your verbal responses in the interview and your written responses in the N400. And you also will not have your application in front of you, so you'll have to know this. Make sure you have reviewed your application in advance and can respond appropriately to the officer's questions. You have demonstrated an ability to speak English if you generally understand and can respond accurately to the USCIS officer. Applicants may ask the USCIS officer to repeat or rephrase questions during the interview. Generally, the whole interview lasts maybe 20 minutes, but that is specific to each situation. Reading, writing, civics tests take about 5 minutes. English speaking part, which is the going over your application, about 15 minutes. Again, most people, if they fail, it's because of this part. Make sure you are prepared before your interview. Next steps. Did I pass? The officer will provide you with a notice of interview results regardless of the outcome at the end of the interview. And sometimes there'll be no decision and your case will be continued. If you fail, you will be scheduled for another interview in 60 to 90 days. You will be retested only on the part you failed and denied if you fail a second time. And if you fail a second time, you may reapply. There's no limit to the amount of times you may apply for naturalization. You will receive a notice of approval or denial of your application. If denied, there'll be an explanation and you may appeal that decision. USCIS has 4 months from the date of the initial interview to issue a decision. And now the oath ceremony. If USCIS approves your N400 application, they will schedule you to take the oath of allegiance at a naturalization ceremony. You will receive a notice in the mail with the date, time, and location of your scheduled naturalization ceremony on Form N445, which is the Notice of Naturalization Oath Ceremony. Read it carefully. If you cannot attend, return the notice to your local USCIS office, along with a letter requesting a new date and explaining why you cannot attend the scheduled ceremony. Failing to appear more than once for your naturalization ceremony may lead to a denial of your application. Currently, due to COVID, USCIS is scheduling far fewer people for each ceremony. The ceremony is much shorter than it used to be. No guests allowed unless it's a person providing disability assistance. You must return your permanent resident card to USCIS when you check in for your naturalization ceremony. You will become a naturalized citizen after you cite the oath of allegiance. You receive your certificate of naturalization after the oath. You would review and notify USCIS of any corrections that need to be made before leaving the ceremony site. Don't assume you can travel abroad right after the oath ceremony, because you will only be able to apply for a US passport after you have been sworn in. Just an important note, please notify USCIS if you change your address after filing Form N400 within 10 days of your move, uscis.gov/address change. Really important to remember to do that, otherwise you'll miss important notices and your application could be denied. Helpful resources. For self-study, there are many tools available online, but always start with the USCIS website. They will send you study materials and have many free resources, practice tests, and a good video of a mock naturalization interview that is an example of what you might experience. Many other self-study online resources, such as usalearns.org/USA Learn Citizenship. Community organizations such as HIAS and libraries offer citizenship preparation classes and programs free of charge. The Vernon Area Library has a class. Unfortunately, it just filled up, so there's no space in that class, but we have another class that's starting February 10th. Will be Thursdays, February 10th to April 28th, 3 to 4:45 p.m. on Zoom. The registration is open now, so if you're, and we're doing that in partnership with the Indian Trails Library. If you're interested, please contact me. My information will be on the next slide. And here we go. Here's the contact information. Our intake line for legal questions, my email, ilanaboyskin@jcfs.org, or my cell number, Margarita's email, or Margarita's cell. So if you've got questions, please contact us. Now we've completed the presentation portion, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Margarita Sandler, to answer questions. I'd like to just ask you if you could take a minute and do the evaluation. The link should be in the chat box. So I'm just going to wait a minute, and then we'll continue on. I'll just give just another, I'll wait till 6:50, and then feel free to, I'll also email it to everyone. We really do appreciate you just doing this for us. All right. Okay, so we have a couple questions here in the chat. I'm just one I'm going to address, which says what will be covered in the classes. In the classes, we cover in detail the parts of the test that I mentioned, which are reading, writing, civics, and interview skills. And the interview skills, the way we address that is going through all parts, covering all parts of the N400 application in detail. And then also we discuss eligibility requirements as well, just to apply for citizenship. So eligibility, English reading and writing, civics, and going through the N400 application in detail. And being able to be in the interview and talk to the officer with appropriate interview skills. And just so that you're just familiar with the substance of the test and just, you know, what's expected of you. That's really, I think that's it. Okay, so let's see. Please put questions in the chat. I see we would love to just, Margarita is very experienced, been doing this for a long time. So this is a good chance to get your questions answered. Margarita, one question here is how and when do we apply for a 10-year-old? Is it the N400 as well?
Okay, a 10-year-old cannot apply for naturalization. What happens with the children is when at least one parent becomes a US citizen, a child who is under 18 can derive citizenship from the parent. And at this point, it's not N400, but N600, application for citizenship, not naturalization, is recommended to be filed. This is basically the information about the parent and the child who has already derived citizenship but needs proof, which is a certificate of citizenship. Or sometimes you can even bypass this step and go directly and get the child a US passport. When at least one parent is a US citizen and the child is under 18 years old. But as for naturalization with civics, English skill test, and the whole interview, children don't go through this.
Right. So that goes back to one of the eligibility. You have to be 18 and over to apply for naturalization, but a child of 10 could get it if their parents are naturalized.
Yeah.
And go through that process.
Even if these are adults over 18.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the parents or both parents are US citizens and got their citizenship naturalized before that person was under 18, this person may not even realize that he or she is a citizen already. That's why before we, while assisting in filing N400 application, we screen people and ask them specifically about the parent's status, and there are questions on the application to make sure they're not US citizen and can apply for naturalization on their own. And in many instances, it turns out that they are US citizens, being not aware of it. And then we know which steps to take to get proof of their citizenship.
Okay. Okay, so another question. Can we travel internationally post biometric tests?
Yes, of course, you can travel internationally. However, as Alana mentioned in her presentation, you need to look closely at your absences prior to this in order not to interrupt your continuous residency, physical presence in the United States, and be careful not to miss the interview date.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely allowed if you have a valid permanent resident card and a passport of your country.
Okay, and how much is the processing time for N400 presently? Yeah, someone said 15 plus months. I think someone answered that, and I don't know, is that correct?
For some people, it's faster. For those who applied at the end of last year, they fit into 12 months. But unfortunately, people who applied much earlier, somehow they got stuck in process. So it's very hard to predict.
Okay.
Due to pandemic or to some other logistical things in the USCIS field offices, we cannot predict.
And we have a few more. Is a valid passport required for the application N400?
Not necessarily. not necessarily. If you have an expired passport of your country, it's totally okay to be naturalized, because this passport is needed to travel abroad, to get a visa or to return to the United States. But for naturalization, it may be an expired passport. Some people are stateless, they don't have passports at all, so it's not a requirement.
So question here, I don't fully understand, and maybe the person who put it in can clarify how to get any mock test or documents to, oh, okay, practice test. Sorry, I do understand it. How to get documents to prepare for the, so like practice tests. Oh, well, there's lots, those are the online resources I mentioned. If I have lists of resources, so again, if you want to reach out to me, I can send those links to you. If you want just online resources, I can share that with you. Oh, all right. So should an adult child be listed if they are not a dependent for taxes?
You have to list every child, biological child, adopted children, anybody living in the United States, living abroad, dependent, not dependent, a child of yours of any age. You list them, it's doesn't mean you're liable for their well-being, for whether they're dependents or not, doesn't matter, just list all of them. And many people make mistakes not listing relatives on the application. For some reason, they just don't think it's important. And later, when people, for example, apply for family-based immigration for anything else, it creates a lot of problems, because if you didn't list your relative on any USCIS application, means this relative doesn't exist, and may lead to any denial should you desire to bring this relative into the United States. So it will not hurt to list everyone.
So we've got a lot of questions. How reliable is the prediction of processing? I think the person means time on provided online. So online, they give you a processing time. Is that a reliable predictor?
No, it's not always accurate.
Let me continue. The person in October 2021, it was given as 8 months. And then in November 2021, the same got changed to 11 months. Since then, it is now reduced to 9 months again.
No, I wouldn't go with this, with what they give you, because it's very individual. And you never know. These predictions just gives you an idea, gives you some approximation, but it doesn't always work.
Okay. I thought it said 8 questions, but that was, I think, all of the 8 messages for part of that one question that was submitted. So sorry about that. Well, we are at 7 o'clock. So has anyone got any more quick question? Well, I think we seem to have answered, Margarita's answered the questions. Yeah, I think we're at the end of the presentation and the program.
Well, thank you, Alana and Margarita, for joining us and for providing everyone with so much information, including myself. For anyone looking for additional information on citizenship, you may contact HIAS directly. I've added the link to the chat, and a big thank you to all of you for joining us tonight as well. So
Thank
take
you.
good care, everybody, and
Thank you, Corey.
we'll see some of you in the classes.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Right. Corey,
Yes.
I'm really sorry.